If I looked at the practice of both physiotherapy and osteopathy within my lifetime, my working life, I always considered my approach to be osteopathic in that I took a history and arrived at a diagnosis. Now that, as I mentioned, is now a part of physiotherapy, a musculoskeletal diagnosis, but it was a very strong part of osteopathy in that you were a primary contact practitioner and you were beholden to get things right, i.e. accept the right patient or not. So you needed to have a much better grasp of the patients you could help. And so I always worked with that in mind. When it came to the administration of treatment, I think the differences, there are fewer differences. You're handling the same pathology, the same problems are all the same mechanical problems, and be it osteopathic, physiotherapy, or whatever, there's only really so many things you can do with them. There were some philosophical differences in the application of exercise. Now, physiotherapy was very exercise geared, still is, was not a big part of osteopathy. Posture and posture management and lifestyle changes were, but the prescription of exercise was not a thing that osteopaths are good at, were ever taught, and so on. But so my physiotherapy training was useful in that I could see the need at times to blend an exercise program with my treatment. So that was an advantage. An osteopath would believe if you improve the function of the patient would operate better and they'd get on and do things. That may happen, but it may happen a little quicker if you could give them a follow-up program that it help them achieve that end. So the blend was useful. But the exercise on its own, without the other bits and pieces, the mobilization, manipulation, the advice, and so on, has been shown over the years not to be as effective. Current research supports that. A balanced, mixed program is generally better than individual pieces just left on their own. So my physiotherapy training was useful there. The names attached to systems that are around Mackenzie, Monaghan, Maitland, and so on, were probably more important in their formative days, but not so now. If you looked at, say a Maitland operator, a Maitland physiotherapist would take a competent history, good examination, very detailed Maitland. When it came to applying their treatment, there you would see the difference in that they're not heavily manipulative based, they're much more mobilization based. Their approach to mobilization is very detailed and they almost overcomplicate what is, I feel, a relatively straightforward approach to biomechanics. They make it, if it can be complicated, Maitland's made it complicated. I'm a little cynical about that because I think that's driven from the universities and some of those people want to have things complicated. I've sat through some discussions on Maitland technique with university teachers, particularly in Australia, and it just blows my mind that they can make such a simple thing complicated, because it's not complicated. Osteopathy is a much more simplified system than Maitland. It's a much simpler system than physiotherapy when it comes to applying treatment. The treatment principles are much simpler. The application of treatment is simple. If we take the Stoddard name you mentioned, Stoddard is, when I was there, Stoddard didn't teach osteopathy, he taught medicine. Stoddard's technique, when I got to England, I found out Stoddard's technique was very dated and crude and verging on, like Syriac's, a bit violent. But the modern osteopathic technique that I was taught was superbly appropriate to the conditions, gentle, specific when it needed to be. And as I mentioned, wasn't taught by Stoddard. Laurie Hartman was the head of technique when I was in London, and he was world renowned and still is for approaching manipulation of the spine, particularly in a very gentle and safe manner. I adopted his, this is a slight aside, I adopted his method of technique, and if we look at we did Maitland, Mackenzie system has excellent qualities about it. I find it's easy to teach or easy to understand, and the students that use it and apply it well, they tend to get into trouble when they move it outside the area it was designed for, and they move it into other parts of the body, which just doesn't make sense to me. But when in the area of the lumbar spine, particularly where it was formulated, it's very effective. The other names you mentioned, Monaghan, Carlton Bourne was and is a physiotherapist who studied osteopathy and adapted their techniques in a fairly unique way and teaches it along that lines. His philosophy, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's mainly technique based. I don't know. I've never seen him work with a patient or read anything he said much about patients. So I think the names that you mentioned are largely practical applications of therapy rather than philosophical approaches. Mackenzie's probably a little different in that no, it wouldn't be the same either. Once he's taken a history, which could be the same as anybody else's, he would then apply his treatment system to that. Osteopathy doesn't have that. It doesn't apply treatment systems. It seeks to find a mechanical reason for perhaps why a person isn't functioning as well as they could in the general sense, be it a mechanical or a general health sense, and see whether there is some hookup between the way they are moving, or bits of their body are moving, and if they find that that is relevant, they'll try and change it. If they find it's not relevant, they'll leave it alone. And they could extrapolate that out and say, well, if the better you function, the more likely you are to be healthier. Now, I would take no more from it than that. I would not say as an osteopath I can improve these aspects of your well-being in terms of your cardiovascular system or general gastrointestinal system and so on, because that's not what osteopathy does. But I would say if I could get you a little freer in your use of your upper limb, and you can move your shoulder better, there will be less stress going through into your shoulder girdle and onto your upper thoracic spine, so there's no need for that to move as much as it is, or trying to move and so on. So you'd be generally more comfortable and a little healthier for having freer moving components. It's that simple.